the main topic of this week's newsletter, which of course is updating your title and description. If you don't already have a title and description on your website, that's something that you should get in there as soon as possible. This is what Google's looking at. This is part of the metadata that is so critical for indexing your site. I'm just going to speak to our hometown customers because I know everyone's on different CMSs, but for our WordPress, we use the all-in-one SEO plugin. So basically what this plugin does is it just takes care of all of this metadata for you in one place. So you just type all your information, your title, your description, and it puts it on all the right pages where it needs to be. Otherwise, if you were doing this site yourself, you'd have to manually go into the HTML and tag this stuff. So it's just one of the many shortcuts that you get with WordPress. Okay, and so then just to go over this form, it's really helpful if every one of our customers could fill this out and submit it. You can choose to either use the recommended settings for the homepage title or a custom title for your homepage. We do have an example of a good homepage title right here. Basically, at a minimum, the name of the newspaper. And if you have room, you want it to be less than 60 characters, as we note here. If you have room, including something about local news in the city and state is definitely good. Obviously, if you can get Google to pick you up as the source of local news in that area, then you're going to do very well. That is an option. You can write your own. Or you can just use our recommended settings for the homepage title. We'll write it for you based on the information that we're going to have you submit. Okay, so just really quick, I'll point this out. City, state, this is the essential info we need. Date founded. That's the stuff that we're going to use to write your recommended homepage title. But everyone, no matter what we do with the title, we all need to write a site description. And that you have much more room, 160 characters for that one. And you definitely want to include the city, state, county, regions being covered. I've also seen some really nice examples of publishers including the categories that they focus on, covering, local sports or whatever is your focus. Just keeping that under 160 characters. This is just a little bit more room to put in, all the keywords that you want to be picked up when Google's indexing the site. Okay, and then the last thing with the form is we just thought it would make sense to provide an opportunity for everyone to provide their social media links, and we'll just get them in the all-in-one SEO so that, as Michael was showing us earlier when he was on the schema markup page, he's got all his social media in the markup, in the schema of the site. That's what we would do here. Now, this is going to allow Google to just come into the site and see all the connections and automatically make those. But it's also an opportunity for them to compare how you're describing yourself and what are your contact hours and your address and all that between all your digital properties, basically. So that is emphasized right here. For the best results, it's important that your website's information is consistent across all social media profiles, your Facebook page, Twitter page, Google business profile, all need to have the same title and description. So it's probably something you should just write once and have in a spreadsheet somewhere so that, anytime a social network is updated, that you're using the same information. Well, let's just start, I guess, by digesting a little bit this presentation from Michael. I mean, I learned something new every single time I talk to him. Certainly his presentations are super dense. So I thought maybe we could take a second to digest, and I took down a couple bullet points that I just want to emphasize from his presentation, and Chris and Tyler jump in at any time, but I'll just kick it off. Number one point that jumped out, and this is chronological, how it happened really in the presentation. Video is a big help to SEO. Just having video on your website. That was interesting to me. Didn't really think about it in terms of Google seeing video on a website and then ranking them higher. I always thought of it as, well, if you're on YouTube, that's obviously all being weighed very heavily for Google, the content out there. So getting on YouTube is good for SEO in that way, because I think technically YouTube is the second biggest search engine in the world after the official Google search page. So that was kind of new to me, and it reinforces my philosophy, which is that so much of the local news content can be reverse published from video. If you can just get your content in video, if that means just discussing a blog post, an article post on your website, or creating a video from an audio article, because we're transcribing all of our text articles into audio and then just putting images from the story on top of that audio narration. You got a video. These are all the lowest hanging fruit for getting into video. Any thoughts on getting into video? What are the barriers to that? Because as he's telling us, that's a huge help. So jump in at any time if you have questions or comments on that. But Chris and Tyler, anything to add on that? I mean, to me, it just reinforces the Today in News Tech strategy where, we produce a video for every article essentially, and then we post that video on the original article.
I think it was interesting just because the whole point about video reinforced something we had discussed during Today in News Tech, the wallpapering strategy, which is basically saying like you need all of your content in every possible searchable format just so that it shows up everywhere.
Yes. And that rings a bell with what Michael said about Twitter. Even just within Google, they're pulling in these other sources like Twitter and prioritizing that. So you've got to be there for that reason. But what you're talking about is if someone's actually on Twitter, then we need to be there because, there's a growing audience there, right? Kind of the platform agnostic idea from Damien.
Well, just since you mentioned Twitter, I thought it was really interesting that he pointed out how valuable Pinterest is, which is something that I didn't expect at all.
That was news to me last year when I heard his presentation. And he's still saying it's super important. I didn't consider that either. Tagging every image on your site for Pinterest. But I know that there is a Chrome extension for this, right? So you don't need to go to Pinterest, log in and download your image and upload it or something. It's a browser extension so that you literally hover over the image on your site. And for our customers, we're extracting a lot of those images from print PDFs. Maybe some of the publishers are putting up the articles themselves, but no matter where it comes from, you can then syndicate it out to Pinterest. And that was kind of the idea behind my question. That's what led to that question about, is there any negative to being on all these social networks? Even if we have no following there's no engagement. And he's saying, yes, there's a benefit because Google sees these other networks pointing to you, and that's enough for them, just to see you out there. We'll have to think about that for Today in News Tech in our hometown. Okay, so unless there's anything else, jump in if there is. I'm going to go to the second take home that I had for this, using hashtags in tweets. Okay, so this was just a nice tip on social media marketing that I took away. Using hashtags, use a hashtag in every tweet. There's no doubt, personally, I've noticed a big difference when I start using hashtags. You get a lot more attention. It's almost like it's dependent on it to really get your tweet out there. And the one tip I would have to contribute that he didn't mention is you can, if you write a tweet and put local news in Salt Lake or whatever the local news tweet hashtag is, then click on that and see what the other tweets are that are referencing that and look at the other hashtags that those tweets are using. It's kind of like what we were talking about last week with Google search results and looking at what other people search for when you put in your query, using the network effect and using Twitter to research new tags. None of this is like rocket science. It's just like a playlist. Like I said, all stuff that you need to make sure you've done and just get a checklist together. This one is very straightforward. All descriptions and contact info must match on all platforms. So that's the NAP, name, address, and phone number at a minimum. And really for us, it's website. I would add that to the list. But, those 4 contact points are essential.
Well, I enjoyed the recursion back to the autocomplete that we covered last week. And that seemed to be one of the things that he was highlighting, at least a portion of it, and gave even a bit better context than we did on why certain things appear with certain searches rather than others.
Oh, wait, we got a comment here from Jenny. Sorry, I missed this. Video lends to originality with a lot of stories being aggregated or republished these days. Yes, the video format, you just look at the engagement on social media. A video, I'm not sure of the factor of engagement of difference, but it's significantly more engaged than a still graphic. And then still graphics are more engaged than just text posts. And videos just lend themselves to being republished and shared, certainly if you're putting it on YouTube, and then sharing a link to that page on your site. So good feedback. I appreciate that, Jenny.